Hello, everyone. This is Micah from edeneyetarot. I am here today to talk to you guys about Juno's ingress into the sign of Pisces. This is one of my favorite videos that I've filmed thus far. I was thinking about doing this video last week, and I'm finally sitting down to do it now. But this whole week that I've been doing other things, I'm like, oh my god, I can't wait for this video to be filmed and come out so you guys can see it. Goddesses in general, I think, are one of my favorite topics just to kind of dive into. I think, like a lot of astrologers, I love mythology, and especially when we can talk about goddess asteroids and give a little love to asteroids and placements in astrology that aren't talked about a lot. I think it just amps it up even more. So today we're talking about the queen bee herself, Juno, and so I got all dolled up for you guys. And I got the crown on and everything. We got to do it right, right? And so we're going to dive in to Juno and Pisces. So before we get into what does Juno and Pisces mean for the collective, I do want to talk a little bit about the mythology and the symbolism behind Juno and some of her symbols in particular, and then we'll get into a little bit of what Juno and Pisces would mean natally, but also that could also apply to transit, and then we'll talk about what Juno and Pisces really what we're looking at that meaning for the collective, and some things that we might see, or some things that I think we'll definitely see while Juno is in Pisces. Juno will enter into the sign of Pisces on April 20th, 2022, and she will be there until January 13th, 2023. And so let's jump into the mythology. So we all know Juno, right? For those of you that don't know, Juno is going to be the Roman counterpart of Hera, the I guess we could say Zeus's counterpart, or his wife, consort, whatever. Juno was known for being, the I guess we could say the ride or die, extra emphasis on the die, because she would, of course, try to smite anyone that her husband had extramarital affairs with. But we can really see in the mythology, despite all of the things that Zeus pulled, or Jupiter pulled, I guess in this case, she always stayed with him. She never left the marriage. And I think this is definitely something that we have to keep in mind when we're talking about Juno, is commitment. And really asking ourselves, what does commitment mean? When we're talking about Juno. So Juno is the goddess of marriage and childbirth. The childbirth part and fertility and sexuality, all of that is very much secondary to her role as a wife, consort, confidant, all of that. First and foremost, she is the wife. Juno was one of two goddesses in Olympus that was married, the other being Venus. But of course, we know the story of Venus and her marriage to Hephaestus and the love triangle. Or I guess you can't really call it a love triangle. It was more like an affair with Venus, with Mars. But Juno took her role as a wife extremely and very seriously. And she is, known to be the goddess of marriage first and foremost. She, of course, never left her husband despite all of his shenanigans. But let's kind of take a look at that while we're talking about it. How did their relationship even begin? Because I think that is also interesting. There are probably differing stories on this, like all myths. There are little tweaks here and there about how things began. But we can, at least the story that I'm pulling on, Hera was, of course, she was just doing her thing, right? Living her best life after, being thrown up by her father. And she was Zeus's sister, of course. But Zeus, of course, wanted her, being Zeus. And the story that I am pulling on personally is going to be the idea, or like the story where it says that Zeus saw her, he wanted her, and instead of just coming up to her and saying hello, nice to meet you, wanna get together, like, he just did the most. He turned himself into a cuckoo bird. And he kicked up a storm and feigned injury and fell into her lap. And of course, she took pity on this animal. And she brought the cuckoo bird to her bosom. And from that point on, he left his cuckoo bird form and became Zeus and actually sexually assaulted her. So he ruined her. And that is how they got married. Is, of course, before this, she was a maiden, and so she was, I guess, ruined. And I even hate saying that because Juno is such an amazing figure to kind of look at past that reputation of being like the jealous wife. But for all intents and purposes, she was ruined, and so she had to marry Zeus. And what a way to start off a marriage. And oops, lost my crown there. What a way to kind of like start off a marriage, right? Especially knowing all the hardships that her marriage would, go through with her marriage with Zeus. Let's like kind of rewind a little bit and talk about the cuckoo bird, because I think that's really interesting also with like the hindsight of their marriage, and how it started with the cuckoo bird, like the cuckoo bird situation. So I find it interesting because the cuckoo birds in particular, they have the ability, I think they're called like the parasite bird. But basically their whole thing is that they have the ability to mimic like their eggs. They have the ability to mimic the coloration of certain other species of birds' eggs, so they can make their eggs look like other birds' eggs. For like there's a certain like it's not all bird eggs, but they can mimic the coloration of some bird eggs, and they lay their eggs. They invade the actual nest of another bird or species of bird, and they'll either like completely just kill off the other birds like children, or they just invade, lay their eggs and peace out. Or the actual like cuckoo bird children or nestlings will actually just go ahead and finish off what their parents started, and they'll kill the native birds offspring and pushing them out the nest, therefore killing them. So these birds just they come out the womb as dicks, like. And I think it's so interesting that knowing that. So basically the native bird, or like the bird that has been tricked, isn't even it's unknowingly raising an invader's children. And I think that's so interesting, especially when we talk about the fact that, Hera and Zeus, they had a very tumultuous relationship. And, they only had, like, I guess, depending on, how you believe it, or like what story you're going off of, they only had like a handful of children together. But Mars was, of course, their child, and Zeus ended up despising him. They didn't have the best relationship. But Hera, she created children herself. And there was always this contention also with Zeus's children. And there's that, famous story of Hera being tricked into nurturing one of Zeus's children. And so I find that so interesting that it all started with the cuckoo bird and the cuckoo bird's like, infamous reputation. It's just very like, it's just wow. And then of course how their marriage started, I always find that really interesting. But of course she like had her own children. She tried to create her own children, and all of these children were made out of spite for her husband. And I of course I don't know Juno personally, but I would like to think that it wasn't all spite, but Wait. But also I want to bring it up that Hera also, or Juno also took, periods of solitude from her husband, whether it be because she was just shamed or, punished, and, she was always like, of course, his wife and consort, but she did take time away on her own, birth island, um, or her own island that was her home to kind of, renew her maidenhood, but also just to have time away from her husband. And we can really see even this in a symbolic reference when we talk about one of her symbols is the pomegranate. Hera was actually, or sorry, Juno was actually an earlier underworld goddess, or like, a goddess of death. And we can see that the pomegranate, whether it be in tarot or mythology, is really connected to the underworld and that theme of transformation. But I think it's very interesting that she did take time to like kind of like go into her own underworld, away from her husband, away from Olympus, to kind of renew and like I guess rebirth herself. And I always find that very interesting. But also we can, when we're talking about Juno, we're talking about, bringing together the archetypes of Libra and Scorpio, and the sanctity of marriage, as well as like, the sexual connotations of marriage, not just like, the very physical, like, concepts of sexuality, but also like the actual like spiritual merging of sexuality, and just being completely vulnerable and honest and open with another partner. Because when we're talking about Juno in this video, I do want to make it very clear that we're not just talking about, Juno is just all about like marriage in a romantic sense, or like marriage, even for like tax purposes. But this can be like you're married to your job, or you enter into a business partnership with someone, or you have a friend. It's any one-on-one relationship. And I also believe that you can have one-on-one relationships with your job. Like you can have your job as your husband or your wife or whatever. But there can also be like, sexual double standards. So like, maybe someone has certain privileges in a relationship that you are not allowed to. In some way, it's suggested that you're not allowed to do the same. Or there can be fear around like completely merging and being completely vulnerable with a person when we're talking about Juno, because we see that reflected in her mythology, and we see it being one of her significations in astrology. So I actually have Juno in Pisces. So I'm like, that's, I guess, like another reason why I really wanted to do this video. I thought it was really interesting to kind of go into more research on this placement. I've done my own research on it, prior to, but I really wanted to do this placement justice since it was my first video on Juno. And I really look forward to doing Juno in the rest of the signs as she progresses into the rest of the signs as well. But of course, like we were saying, Juno represents our commitment to others, whether it be like romantic or not. And it can be also the expectation. It's like the commitment. It's like that concept of the expectation of a balanced and fair relationship. And when those expectations aren't met, Juno expresses herself with like vengeance, or she lashes out. And we see a lot of, of course, like Juno lashing out in her mythology as well. And as someone that has Juno in Pisces on her sun, like, I was just like researching, more into her mythology and kind of like drawing my own kind of thoughts about Juno and Pisces as well. And I was like, ouch, like, because I've definitely done some of these, or I've like, at my worst moments, I've seen the lash out like in myself, and I'm like, this hurts. Let's talk about Juno and Pisces. Like, and so we're going to talk about this, I think, like in a, personifying this in a person, but keep in mind that we can also talk about all of these things as something we can experience while we're having Juno in Pisces as well. And so people with Juno in Pisces, or what we can see while Juno is in Pisces, is like a need. Pisces is very fantastical, right? It's full of compassion, and it's full of belief and optimism, almost to a fault. And it's very much, it's very trusting. And it's a big picture thinker, right? And Juno is all about marriage, and Pisces is very like fantasy everything, and it can sometimes see things with rose colored glasses and not see the realities of things. And so we can see with this placement, there is a need for the partner to like fulfill an ideal vision of whatever the person with Juno and Pisces, or just in general, what we think the other person should be, wanting them to fulfill that, that perception, that ideal perception of them. And we can really end up putting people on a pedestal, and that's a lot of pressure. It's no longer like when you're talking about Juno in Pisces, especially. It is no longer about the me in a relationship anymore. It can really easily turn into it's about we, because Juno in general, by herself, she wants her sacrifices. She sacrificed a lot for Zeus. And when we see it in astrology, we see not only that sacrificial element, but we also see, especially in Pisces, we see the need for those sacrifices to be acknowledged and possibly even praised. And so there can be a lot of like sacrifice, especially, like I said, in Pisces. Pisces will, of course, play the victim, be the martyr, and all of that. And it's like this big romantic gesture, I think, in its best expression, but it can easily turn very dark. But yeah, there can be a lot of putting, people up on a pedestal, and, expecting them to fulfill our ideals. And those are going to also be like, an extension of like not progressions, projections of our own, like desires and our own goals. It's like, and that's why I'm saying it's not, when Juno and Pisces can easily turn into like, it's no longer about the individual, it's about us, because I am you, you are me. I don't know if anybody's seen, like, there's a TikTok out there somewhere about like couples, and you see like a couple like cuddling, and one person in the couple is like, they're gradually getting closer to the person, and snuggling up, and then eventually they say, "But I want to be in your skin." Like, and like that is just so Juno and Pisces to me, because it's very affectionate, but it's kind of creepy, but it's like, but it's very much like that mergy kind of energy, wanting to merge, wanting to be completely like enveloped in another person. And so we can easily see not, I keep wanting to say progressions, projections of our own ideals and values, and goals that maybe we haven't even, achieved ourselves, being projected onto the partner. And so whatever they achieve is now our success too. And people with Juno and Pisces can, unknowingly fall into this as well, as, just getting lost in their relationship. I think we can also see a lot of people maybe, absolutely just kind of maybe going ghost, possibly on friends, because they have a relationship that they're absolutely getting lost in, whether it is like a marriage relationship, dating, talking to someone, or, business partnership. Then they're just getting completely like enveloped in the relationship. And they're, making that sacrifice of like cutting out friends, or cutting out, certain engagements, or whatever. We can also see the want for, like I said, the partner to kind of be everything, our friend, our lover, our confidant. Obviously, if it's a business partnership, it wouldn't be like the lover, but you want them to be completely competent and on it, like, and just like that support for you. Maybe that you're not able to give for yourself. You want them to be everything that you are and that you're not as well. can also be like, wanting that person, especially, to be an emotional confidant, and always be available and accessible to you all the time. Like, it can also be a time where we see a lot of like creative or a need for like, for you and a partner to, have a lot of time being creative together, or wanting your partner to be very creative, um, or very like spiritual and open-minded, wanting to come together with people that embody those traits, in particular. It can even be like, because we can't forget that Pisces is very altruistic, so we can, really be attracted to people that can be martyrs or very, compassionate towards others, and that's not bad. But remember, there's a spectrum on everything, and it can easily go too far. And I think we can see like, there is, a want for your partner to be honest, but honest in a way that suits the fantasy. Sometimes that can really like break the illusion with Juno and Pisces, and that can turn into like a lashing out, or disillusionment, or just kind of feeling extremely hurt. There can be like a want, on the other end, for a partner to want the other partner to be very like just equally as infatuated with them as you are with them, like with you as if you are with them. We can see a lot of that, and just be completely devoted to you on a soul level as well. We want maybe like someone to be very supportive of our goals, and to recognize our sacrifices, and really commit to the relationship, and put in as much time, to put in as much time and effort into a relationship as we are. And sometimes that's not the case, but I think we'll see a lot of that is that expectation of, I'm putting in this and I sacrifice this, so you need to meet me like the same. You need to meet me the same. Remember that Pisces is a double-bodied sign. And so we are looking at, a more collective kind of energy with Pisces in particular, but we're also looking at like, what's good for me is good for everybody. And when you're talking about a relationship, that itself is a fantasy. We really can see like, wanting our partners to, embody our wildest dreams. It's no longer, your accomplishments or my accomplishments, it's our accomplishments. And we want the other person maybe to feel that same way. When we win, when I win, we win. Like, and just wanting our partners to sacrifice for us as well, and just kind of fully merge. With Pisces as well, it can also be like, we want our partners to really keep our promises, like to keep the promises that they make, because it's a lot about like keeping that oath, not just dipping out, on the first, or first, second, third, screw up. Like, really keeping true to what you say you're going to do. It can really want this perfect confidant, and that can be like the fantasy that can be very easily disillusioned. And when we have that disillusionment, that's when we can see the lash out that comes from Juno and Pisces. That can be anywhere from like guilt tripping to like the silent treatment, because we have to remember that Pisces is ruled by Neptune, which is the planet that can really bring in the concept of isolation. And so it can be isolating your partner, or even isolating yourself, and just kind of pulling back and being distant from the partner, whether that be emotionally or physically or both. But I can definitely see a lot of silent treatment, like situations going on in cases where you're lashing out, or you're seeing people lash out because maybe not that you've done anything wrong, but that mirror has been cracked, that we've created in a situation. And so I can see a lot of silent treatment or like isolating our partners, and pulling back, throwing like sacrifices in, a partner's face and being like, well, I did this for you. Like, how could you do this to me, kind of thing, like with all the tears. I'm just thinking of like that famous like meme with like Kim Kardashian where she's crying and she's like, didn't do it justice, but you guys know what I'm talking about. Um, we can also see like maybe a lot of people like, just begrudgingly like voicing their regrets about a situation without actually leaving. Which brings me to, we were talking about Juno's periods of isolation from her husband Zeus and then coming back to him. Juno is not about leaving situations forever. It's the constant like needing space and then coming back together. So especially with the Mercury retrograde in Gemini coming up, and going back into Taurus, I think we'll see a lot of people like breaking up, getting back together, but ultimately coming to some sort of like ultimatum point. Because this is where Pisces is ruled by Neptune. So ultimately we will see some sort of dissolving. And this is kind of like the time where we're seeing that back and forth. But eventually, I think even as we get, further into Juno and Pisces, there's going to be some sort of ultimatum brought up by, partners. We can see, that dramatic breakup, like I was talking about, then getting back together. We can also see like a lot of like getting clingy and possessive over our partners, or, there's some fear over isolation or abandonment that can come out, whether it be your own or, just, your own fears about like, oh, like I'm going to leave this person before they leave me, kind of thing. Or you're just up your partner's ass all the time, like, whether it be you're always texting them, or like, you're, you want to be with them everywhere. It can turn really dark, guys. I'm telling you, like, thankfully I've never done this, so far, but I have experienced the insecurities part. It can also come out like as, just secret fears that don't make any sense. Against all facts or realities, there are certain fears that can come up when we're disillusioned in partnerships that like we are completely acting on, or voicing, that honestly if we put them up against what's really happening, or if we actually talk about it, because that could be another thing with Juno and Pisces, is that Juno and Pisces, it feels a lot, but there can be a lack of communication because it's so caught up in the feelings of things and the fantasy. We can see also just like straight up ignoring toxicity in relationships and, issues in relationships. I can totally see like a lot of people like because Juno is going to be a representative by herself. She like represents like women's groups or women's support groups. So I can totally see this being the time where for like, for women in particular that, they go over their girlfriend's house and it's like a girls' night, and all their girlfriends are telling them like, leave his toxic and leave his toxic ass, or like leave her toxic ass, or whatever. And your friend's just really hyping you up, because we have to remember again that Pisces is, because it is that double-bodied sign, it's a sponge for a lot of stronger energies, and sometimes it can be easily influenced. And because of that hype up, Juno and Pisces can really get high on its own, influence, or like liquid courage. So this could be like you totally like drunk texting your ex, or like breaking up, with someone when you're drunk or something like that. Or just making up a reason, or making up a straight up lie about why you're breaking up or why you need space, and not being brave enough to actually confront your fears about a relationship and relationship issues, and just making up just some complete bullshit, if I'm being completely honest, about why you need time away, and not being honest about that as well. However, Juno and Pisces, it's ironic because Juno and Pisces does expect that honesty. It can also be like emotionally disconnecting or dissociating from a relationship, but continuing to stay, which I think can, bring up a lot of resentment on both ends as well. So we just want to be careful about that. Collectively, I think we'll see a lot of issues of equality and freedom for all that kind of come up, especially in relationships. But just on a collective level, I think we'll see a lot of that. Juno rules over like women's rights. And then we'll also see Pallas Athene come into Taurus as well. So that is also just kind of like, adding fuel to the fire there. We'll definitely see, I think, a lot of women's rights issues come up as well. Or a lot of attention, possibly tension too, but attention coming to those issues. We can see a lot of people like suddenly getting engaged. Juno is, of course, the goddess of marriage, but she also rules over divorce as well. We have to have that spectrum. So we can see a lot of people suddenly breaking up or suddenly breaking their commitments to, a partner, and sudden breaks that you may come back to later to see, and you see if you can reconcile. It can be also, like I said, people bring up ultimatums. So like, one partner is saying, let's, be completely devoted, let's go all in. And the other person's like, I need some time. Let's slow down for a little bit. And, in someone saying, well, either you do this or I do this. I can see that coming up collectively, like with government, or like, when we're talking about even, personally, of course, but like, our relationships with maybe other countries and things like that, ultimatums being brought up. We can see it also as like maybe Pisces is like everything that's virtual, especially since Jupiter is still in the sign of Pisces, pretty close to Neptune. A lot of people really showing off their relationships on social media, or, like I said, like, going on like romantic trips and, becoming very isolated with their partners, or, really just kind of like isolating themselves from like people in favor of the relationship, or not being able to show up, can be another way that Juno and Pisces is represented, not showing up in favor of a relationship that you have for others. Juno is not only the ideal wife, but she's also the hostess with the mostest. And so maybe we can see, like maybe like people starting to plan like very extravagant, like, parties that are like a little weird, like everything that's a bit like more ethereal. And so maybe we can see like more costume parties or like masquerade balls, because Juno rules masks and things like that. Hopefully we won't be seeing like the return of the actual like COVID fake mask, but maybe it'll be the fun masks, like but we can see that, but also see like, I could see it also being like new beauty trends being pushed, or like, people trying new beauty trends, and new products being pushed out as well when it comes to beauty, or, us really questioning the standard of beauty, especially since Juno will be entering Pisces right before the eclipse in Taurus, and the Sun and Uranus will be conjunct for that eclipse. And so it can really be like, changing up our values when it does come to marriage, when it does come to commitment, when it does come to beauty, changing all of those things, or at least questioning those things. I think also like a best case scenario, we could see like, this huge movement of people really talking about like recommitting to themselves, and really focusing more on the value that they bring, and that they have within them. Dating themselves. I would love to see more of that, as an expression of Juno and Pisces. I'm always hopeful. And, really getting into what you create yourself, regardless of other people. I would love to see also women supporting other women, like we talked about, Juno ruling women's support groups. So I would love to see women supporting other women, showing up to defend other women, I would love it. But I could also see the other side of that being a lot of women being very jealous of other women or lashing out at other women, especially if there's a man involved, like, literally, Juno's story playing out on Earth. Um, and we can also see maybe like attention brought to like hidden sex crimes or like domestic violence, battered women, and abused children. So I'm wondering if we're going to see some progressions in the Epstein case as well, or possible like new discoveries, regarding that case in particular or other cases. I can also see this maybe on the darker side, like being like, more reports of like, stalkers or people that are becoming obsessed, or like, they have like this fantasy relationship with other people. Maybe on the lighter end, this will be a lot of people like having, imaginary girlfriends, imaginary wives, and imaginary boyfriends, or getting like really into like, self-love and sex toys, maybe. I don't know. But like Venus will still be in Pisces, Mars will still be in Pisces. And so I am very hopeful for like, all the creativity and all of the, coming back to self and the self-love that can happen, whether it be like, actually physically loving yourself or like, self-esteem, loving yourself. But I could see also the darker end being like stalkers, obsession, being delusional about certain relationships and, expectations that you have of people, especially once we get closer to like the Scorpio lunar eclipse in Taurus as well. I could see that happening a lot, since Juno will be, of course, trining all that energy, and that eclipse is a doozy itself. But we can also see like maybe like what is it, people really questioning what does it mean to be committed or like yoked to someone. Do you have to have a piece of paper, or is it just the commitment that matters? What are you bringing to, what is each person bringing to a partnership? And should it be the same amount, or does that matter? Is that like a deal breaker? We can also maybe see, I could see like classism, or like, I mean, in the US, it kind of runs wild anyway, but maybe also that getting worse on the other end. But I could also see like maybe like attention being brought to like our oceans, and the condition of and the treatment of our oceans as well. And lastly, I could see like, some pretty gnarly storms kicking up as well. Juno rules over like storms and weather. So we could see some interesting weather, especially like wet weather. I know where I am in Ohio, like of course, April, but we are, and it's not uncommon for Ohio, unfortunately, but I'm still seeing snow today, and it was actually accumulating, and I was like, what the fuck is going on? But I think we'll see, even more like weird weather occurrences once Juno is securely in Pisces. I don't think that will stop as well, and climate change can really be something that's more brought up as well, and that effect that we're seeing from like large bodies of water or through weather. But with that being said, guys, that is my video on Juno and Pisces. I hope that it was helpful for you guys. Let me know down in the comments, where is your Juno? And let's see, what's another like fun question? Yeah, just let me know where your Juno is. Are you excited about Juno moving into Pisces? Any big romantic plans? But other than that, I will talk to you guys later. Follow me on all my social media, and you can click the link down below to book your session with me. I will see you soon. Bye.